Welcome back, everybody, to season 2 of Beyond the Borderline. Back after a brief hiatus, summer vacation. And we'll just reintroduce the cast real quick here because now we're on video. So obviously you guys can see me now. I'm Connor. Ryan, why
Phil.
don't you go ahead? Oh, Phil, go ahead.
Phil's the one in the goofy shirt.
Hey,
But I can't say shit because my sweater is the goofiest of the lot.
I was gonna say I really like your sweater, Cam. I like the colors.
Okay, it's a total dad sweater, but
I like it.
I'm morphing into a dad, so it's all good.
it's the
Oh,
fall.
man.
Uh,
Anyways, kick us off, Cam.
yeah. So hope everyone had a good summer vacation. We're back, season 2, and my cats are jumping all over the place. Okay. Anyways, season 2. Like Connor said, we're gonna kick it off with what's gonna be kind of a series throughout this season, which is just what ifs. So, Marvel has played with this concept, so we'll take our shot at it as well. Basically, just theories of alternate history, just looking at certain major turning points in history and saying, well, what if it went differently? So I think one we'll tackle later is we had talked about this, is doing like, what if the Roman Empire never adopted Christianity as its official religion? Now the most popular religion in the world. So, obviously things would be much different. But another one from more recent memory, which has shaped our world, in a myriad of ways. The cats are just being violent right now. Absolutely violent.
Menaces.
But the topic we're going to discuss today is, what if the Allies had lost World War II? So basically the parameters on this would be like, well, what if the Allies lost World War II? What if the Nazi regime had survived and had accomplished their goals, more or less, of taking over Europe, subjugating Britain and the other European powers, and then, doing whatever they may have wanted to do in the Americas or wherever else.
Well, I'm just gonna start off by saying, well, I'm not as well versed as probably Cam is in the history of World War II. However, we all know how World War II ended, right? United States bombed Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Let's say, for instance, that the Allies lost the boots on the ground war in Europe and Germany had full and complete control over all the countries in Europe. Let's say that happened. I would argue that would have given the United States even more cause to bomb Germany than they would have to bomb Japan. And nothing would have prevented, even if Germany did win and took over all of Europe, that would not have prevented the United States from developing, the power of the atom. And in fact, that probably would have given them even more cause to develop the nuclear technology. So I'm maybe I'm not even assuming this, but I don't think it would be all that much different for Western society. But Europe would be drastically different, because I would see it as, okay, United States is doing the cost benefit analysis here. Nazi Germany has taken up control over all of Europe. There's nothing left. Yeah, we need to bomb them because they're the ultimate threat.
Okay, well, one thing though. Okay, what if it wasn't just Germany that won, but the entire axis? Like, what if
So
the
are we going to
Japanese
assume
had defeated, well, like, there are multiple scenarios here, but one, to answer what you just said, Ryan, is what if the Japanese had completely crushed the US Navy in the Pacific, and the US Army, along with the Brits and the Canadians and the French and everyone else, was defeated on the ground in Germany? Then what? Does the United States still have the capacity to fight Germany, even with nuclear weapons involved? And B, with that extra time being bought for the Germans by, securing their eastern and western fronts in Europe, would they then have had the time to develop atomic weapons of their own? Because they were very, very close.
Right. Yes, that is also to take into consideration. But jumping specifically back to, you said, what if Japan had managed to wipe out all of the United States' naval capabilities?
Yeah, or just cripple it.
I know we're trying to entertain a what if scenario here, but that would be really, really unlikely because the United States' naval capabilities, even back in World War II, was the biggest in the world.
Yeah, but
Or at least
what
close,
if?
or
I
at least
think another
among the
major
top three.
But
I
what
think
if?
another
Damn it! What if?
major cataclysm. I think another major cataclysm was the fact that they turned on the Russians, and the Russians were a big part
Yeah,
of
yeah.
why things changed, of why the tides turned. So, are we going to assume that they didn't turn on Russia? Because I think that's a huge factor to take into consideration if they move into the Western Front.
Well, no, like let's count Russia among the allies. Like let's just talk about the boundaries are like the way it all ends in 1945. If
Okay.
I mean, you could just say, well, it didn't happen, and so
So
there's
yeah,
no
so
way
if
that
we're
the
saying
Germans.
that the Germans still turned on Russia, I don't think they have enough power to get to
Yeah, I
the
think this one
Americas.
right here, in order to entertain this what if, I think we have to be under the assumption that Germany, Russia, and Japan all remained friendly.
Okay.
Because
What about Italy? No, I guess no one really cares.
They're too
unfortunately,
small. Italy was not
they're
as
too
big
small for
enough
it to matter.
as
Yeah, fair
yeah.
enough. Sorry to all the Italians out there. But
Now,
No, yeah,
Cameron,
no disrespect
did you
to
know?
Italy.
Actually, okay, I need to recheck this. But as far as the last I saw, a granddaughter of Benito Mussolini sits in the Italian parliament today.
Oh,
Like,
really?
yeah, like she's not crazy. I'm pretty sure she's not like a fascist. But like,
Yeah, she's like, listen, my grandfather was kind of a crazy fucker.
I will finish what you started.
Oh gosh.
yikes.
Okay, but let's say for instance, let's say for instance, even though however highly improbable, United States completely lost boots on the ground, their naval forces were completely wiped out. Let's say there was absolute dominance by Nazi Germany. What would the world look like today?
Yeah. Well, okay, sure. Yeah, that's basically what we were getting at this whole time. And
Now, is the notion that Germany, well, the war ended and Germany was considered the victor, or was it that they were considered the victors and still went about their business, like taking over Europe?
I think
yeah. Oh, I said at the beginning, Germany wins and conquers continental Europe, at least continental Europe, maybe Britain as well.
If that happened, I think today, I think eventually Germany would have encroached on Western lands and taken that over too. Because let's say let's say the Nazis and Hitler decided to keep their relationship with Russia and Japan, they would then become the three largest powers in the world. And I think you would have in the West and all over continental Europe a highly militaristic fascist society that promotes the ideals that the Nazis were trying to push, the true Aryan race,
but that's
the
that's like,
extermination
think about
of the Jewish culture.
But these are the two questions that come up then. The
It's 80
main
years
one
now.
is, can such a state survive? That's the thing with the Nazis, right? Is they were around for 12 years. They were in power. If they had won, would they have managed to survive? I don't think so. Because it was such a cult of personality built around Hitler himself, who was suffering greatly in terms of health towards the end of the war, and
Right.
likely wouldn't have lasted long anyways, even if he didn't off himself. So the cult of personality around the Fuhrer disappears with his death, especially if if it's not a martyrdom, then your God on earth just died. What are you going to do now? And second of all, just the whole apparatus of the state itself, could that have survived? Could that have survived in liberal Europe? Could it have encroached on liberal United States?
This is the question I ask you, Cam, because out of the four of us, I think you know World War II history better than the three of us. Would there have been a figurehead that could have replaced Hitler? Like, let's say Hitler eventually succumbed to his health issues and he passed. would there have been someone to take the mantle? Would there have been someone to inspire the same level of dedication that Hitler did?
I don't
Because
think so. I don't think so.
what a lot of people don't know is there were quite a few there were quite a few Nazis that, and there was a movie, Tom Cruise did a movie about this called Valkyrie. There was quite a few Nazis that tried to usurp and take out Hitler before the end of the war.
Yeah.
So who's to say that faction, a small sect of those people still, would have continued and remained, and then if Hitler had passed.
Well, that's the thing about the Nazi regime as a whole. It was such a utopian vision, and their drive to accomplish this vision of, a Central European master race dominating the world essentially, and bringing back some kind of, evoking some kind of notions of a new Rome, a new European empire. Their way of getting at that was like rabid, it was obsessive, it was reckless. I mean, hell, like we talked about, they disregarded their alliance with Russia completely. They invaded Poland probably prematurely. I mean, just the fact that they were willing to launch themselves into an all-out war in Europe 20 years after the first one is insane. Not to mention
how much resources Hitler wasted bombing England.
Yeah, well, and not to mention the resources wasted and the complete human tragedy that was the Holocaust and the genocide of the Jews and Gypsies and other individuals. And so one thing that comes into play is what happens when they win, because the Nazi regime was created out of a very specific set of circumstances, political circumstances, their loss from the previous war, economic circumstances, certainly.
I was right in the time of the Great Depression, if people didn't know. So this was like, I think one of the big factors was
right, and the fear
the
of
Great Depression.
The economics, the fear of communism, the fear of Bolsheviks infiltrating the German system, this spontaneous rise in nationalism, but it was all a perfect storm that led to that. And that storm ravaged Europe for a decade. But could it have lasted? I don't think so. Again, Hitler, there was no one to replace him. Thanks to the cats again. There was no one to replace him, and also what were they going to fight for beyond that?
I don't think they would have been able to get into the Americas, that's for sure.
Yeah, but like the people, the thing is, like the Nazi regime, at least for
here's
time,
all I'm saying.
What?
I'm just gonna say that I think even if they were able to conquer all of Europe, which, they would still not be able to run a long time, because they wouldn't be able to get into America in, let's say, like 3 years, 5 years after that. They'd run out of military.
Not necessarily. If you conscripted all the countries that you were occupying, and you stole the British Navy, and you started, Germany is the most industrial country in Europe. It's the fourth largest economy in the world today. So if we say there was a lull, this is a possible scenario. If we're talking about the military aspect, let's say there's a lull after the end of the war. The United States is crippled. Europe is taken over. The Germans have enough time to develop atomic weapons. And so a new kind of Cold War scenario happens, where there's mutually assured destruction between Germany and the United States, if the United States remained a world power under this scenario, where they wouldn't use those weapons against each other for fear of mutual destruction. And at the same time, as Hitler demonstrated he was capable of, the German industrial machine ramped up to such a degree that they were able to create a navy to rival and surpass the United States. Then the question becomes, is a continental invasion of the United States possible? Probably not.
Well, it's not just the United States though, right? Because it's
Yeah, I mean, it
the
depends.
US, Canada, Mexico,
Well,
Southern
right, but
America.
right. Well, yeah, that's the thing. But did those countries, would they have capitulated? Who knows? But the
Think
other
about
thing, and
landmass
I
size too,
think
though.
no, I know, but the I think the more interesting question is in terms of the actual nature of the government itself and what it says about people, and like, would people have continued to live under that fascist regime? I don't think so. I think it's inevitable that it would have collapsed. Absolutely inevitable. Because human beings can't be under the boot of such a repressive regime for so long without revolt happening.
Oh yeah, in every
Right.
instance, in every example in history, every time a population finds itself under a fascist retributive boot, to use Cameron's term, there's always been a revolt or rebellion of some sort. Every
Yeah,
time.
and also, like, again, going back to the perfect storm that created the rise of the Nazis, what happens when all those factors disappear? When Germany has all the Lebensraum, the living room that it needs for its citizens, when it has the most powerful economy in the world and a strong currency, when it has, everything, then suddenly the focus goes back to the government. And hold on, well, life is good now. Do we need you anymore? Do we need this harsh order that you're imposing? Do we need this blatantly racist, discriminatory, genocidal,
Inhumane. Yeah.
inhumane government in power anymore? That's the thing, right? The storm would die down. That's what I think. That's what I think.
So
Feel free
the
to
other thing
disagree.
I wanted to entertain quickly is I don't think it would have been, let's say Hitler wasn't in, let's say he got his health issues corrected and he managed to live a longer lifespan. I don't know how hard, or maybe it might not have been that hard, because there was a lot of, there was also a lot of hate for the people of the Jewish culture in the United States around that time.
Yeah.
I don't know how hard it would have been for Hitler to indoctrinate and to, bring people into his line of thought if they managed to invade the United States.
That's a good point, actually. That's a
Because
really
there was a lot of hate for Jewish people back then. Unfounded, very, not right at all, but there was a lot of hate for Jewish people, even in the United States.
Mhm.
So
how much fascist sympathy could he have garnered from
yeah,
either side?
exactly.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a very
Have
good
you
point.
wanted
Now to counter that though too, there's a lot of people fleeing from the countries that were captured by the Nazis, right? There's people fleeing, people dying, and people being captured. So I think eventually all these different countries that people fled from, eventually at some point they're going to come back in full force, right?
Well, not necessarily that, but it means that the Nazi regime would have had to have done a massive cover up / PR fix, decades in the making, probably, to convince people that they were in any way a morally virtuous government.
But when you have millions and millions of people that have firsthand encounters of what was going down, you can't really change.
No, I mean, they had an incredible propaganda machine. So maybe they could have worked towards that end, but their propaganda leader offed himself as well.
Yeah, so the whole reason why Hitler was able to mobilize so quickly was through his propaganda machine. He was able to convince everyone that all of Germany's problems are attributed to the people of the Jewish culture, which, as we know, is completely unfounded, terrible methodology. But that worked for a time in Nazi Germany. Would that same propaganda machine work in the United States at that time?
Right. Probably not. Right. That's
the interesting
Probably not,
thing
because even
about-
though there were quite a few people in the United States that did have disdain for people of the Jewish culture, I still don't think it was more than the people that would rather not see any person, even people of the Jewish faith, be treated that way.
Yeah, it certainly wasn't enough. It likely wouldn't have been enough to outweigh, well, to justify the United States completely abandoning its entire political culture, like, and adopting fascism or welcoming a foreign invasion. I mean, it's the United States we're talking about.
I think
They
the
overthrew
only
their
way,
own
I think the only way, if Hitler managed to stay alive and push through his health issues, I think the only way he could have gotten the result that he got in Germany in the United States would be if he had the people of the United States by the balls. You know what I mean? If he had some way of ensuring, if you don't do what I say, you're dead. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Now, would that be if he had a nuclear weapon, the United States didn't? Sure, maybe I could see that as you know, he's basically by threat of death, fear of death is causing you to pledge your loyalty to me. I could see in that scenario, yeah, sure, he could take over the United States, but that's a very that's a very specific example, right? There are a lot of things would have to go his way for that to work.
Hold on. Let's hear from Phil. This
You know
is
what?
we're gonna
I tried
continue the
to
pattern. We're gonna
slip in
continue the
there.
pattern from season 1
I know.
of me giving
know.
voice to Phil. Phil, what
I
are your
just have
thoughts?
to gather from what everyone else spoke about.
It's just
So
a what if. It's
basically-
a anything.
What I was saying, I agree with Cam that after they accomplish the Nazis, like what they want to accomplish, there's no real drive to search for anything more, given that they use such drastic actions and impulsive, you can say. So there's no real sustainability to that. And I think that this war, like this regime, would not have gone on for decades longer because it would fizzle out and more people would try to get in Hitler's way. And I find it akin to what I think in my scenario is that the way that Germany would form and the regions around it would be similar to the Soviet Union. They had a grasp on certain territories. They promoted their own language. They promoted their own culture. Then slowly as time went on, you can say that the patriotism diluted at each leader. And then very soon after, or right before the dissolution of the Soviet Union, they had some bozo running it, essentially.
Boris Yeltsin after, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, but it was Mikhail Gorbachev that basically, put an end to the last remnants of the Stalinist era in the Soviet Union. Right? It was their own general secretary, their own president, who said this isn't going to work. We need to have some liberalization of this country, and then it collapsed. So yeah,
now we're seeing in Russia we're seeing a return to tradition.
Well, and we're seeing what Phil mentioned as well, the kind of nationalistic revolt against that imperial power. I mean, Ukraine is fiercely independent from Russia right now. I mean, you hear the stories of the people on the ground, like they are willing to fight tooth and nail to the end to not be annexed by Russia, and that's a remnant of the trauma that the Soviet Union imposed upon its republics, and so certainly the Nazis could have had a parallel there.
Speaking of Germany's industrial capabilities back in World War II, look at what's happening now. Russia, basically pigeonholing the availability on power and oil. Hydro bills or electricity bills in Germany have gone up 700% as a result of Russia cutting off supply lines for energy.
Damn. Well, actually, speaking of Russia, that's another alternative. How long could Germany have kept Russia down? Let's say they hypothetically beat them on the Eastern Front. how long
How
could
long would
they
they
have
put up with it?
subjugated? Because the USSR at that point, they still had their natural defense of the winter, which defeated the Germans in the real timeline. They still have become, one of the foremost industrial powers in the world. They had nuclear weapons as well. So that's the other thing, is it might have turned into like, scrap the Cold War between the US and the Soviet Union. It could have been a full-on war between Germany and Russia in like the
Mhm.
60s,
Perhaps, and I could definitely see this as one of the possible outcomes. Perhaps Germany would have vied and advocated to Japan to help them take on the growing threat of the USSR. I could definitely see Nazi Germany, talking to Japan, the empire, the emperor specifically, and saying, listen, yeah, we've taken out all of Europe now. United States is the threat of the United States has been neutralized. The next threat is now looming over our heads. It's Russia. That's the next thing we got to take care of, because they're an equal threat to both of us combined in some ways.
Now,
Yeah.
if a war were to break out between Germany and Russia right after Germany won, would Germany's grasp on Europe essentially be a kind of okay, maybe we should join Germany's side to fight Russia? Do you think the Allies would kind of switch in a sense, or would they kind of stay where they are?
Actually, it would be
I don't think so.
it would actually be beneficial to the Allies, specifically the United States, to stay out of it. You know what I mean? Let them dwindle their numbers. Let them dwindle their numbers between each other, and then pick off the scraps that remain.
Yeah, that actually is a great question. Like, I think then the people would divide into all sorts of factions, because, communism, to its credit as an ideology, is one without borders, but so is the appeal of fascism to people who are, messed up. Um, so,
Now, what if the United
you-
States had allied with Russia? That would be a powerhouse.
well, that's the thing, right? Is like, what do the liberal democracies do when, if we take this scenario to be true, and the Cold War turns into a real war between fascism and communism, which are ideological enemies of one another. So if the fight becomes between fascist continental Europe and communist, well, and Japan maybe, and communist Russia and China, which was not a powerhouse at that time, but still, what would they have done? The US probably would have just sat around.
No, it's really it's an interesting thought experiment to think how this would go, because we want to think a lot would change, but how much really would change? Because the environmental landscape of Europe and Russia can only, accommodate a certain number of outcomes, right? Because there's also things to consider resource management. What if Germany just became so overextended fighting Russia immediately after World War II that they just depleted all their resources?
Yeah, well, that's where the takeover of other European countries would come in handy. Plundering the French, plundering the British, plundering the Spanish, plundering the Italians.
But at some point, if they're in a constant fight with Russia, their production can only be maintained for so long.
Yeah. So that's probably the most likely of outcomes, is that it would have been a constant battle to not be defeated.
Yeah.
By someone, whether that
and to the same extent, Russia is limited to Russia for its resources. Yeah, let's say it manages to take over some Baltic European countries, they can start plundering those resources, but they're not infinite there. Those are small countries.
Yeah, it's crazy. We definitely all would not be speaking German right now. I think that's kind of that's kind of what people think of when it's like, what if the Nazis won? Well, we'd all be speaking German right now. Like,
not necessarily.
Probably not.
Probably not.
Especially
now,
those
if
of us
we
who
were
aren't
a
blonde
neighboring country,
and blue eyed.
perhaps not Westerners.
Yeah, it's crazy. The question of Britain actually is an interesting one, because Hitler respected the Brits more than other European races or ethnicities, as somewhat akin to his idea of the Aryans, the next best European race. It's just a supremely flawed way of thinking. Like, how
Then
crazy
I
is
guess
that? But that's like, what would they have done with Britain? Kind of had it as like a tributary, but not totally destroyed it. Maybe more lax with the Brits. I don't know.
So then I guess by extension, he would probably have felt the same way about the Scandinavian countries too, because they're the pure example of the Aryan race, right?
Well, in terms of appearance, I guess.
Yeah.
But
In terms of
he was
appearance.
more concerned with ethnicity through bloodline. But certainly some of the Scandinavian countries, they would have shared a common ancestry. But yeah, I mean, just the fact that we're talking about this highlights how absolutely insane. But that's what the ideology of Nazism under Hitler was predicated on, these ideas about racial superiority, and about ethnic cleansing, and it's just insane. But that's the bottom line, is that I don't think that was not sustainable. No way.
No.
In order to crush your opponents fully, you have to crush the liberal spirit fully.
Yep.
In Europe, where it originated, and a government predicated on such insanity, such rabid insanity, couldn't have done it.
So the conclusion is that even if they didn't lose in 1945 or whatever, they still would have lost eventually.
Eventually, yeah.
Yeah.
Eventually.
Even if, let's say, even if they had complete world domination, the ideology of Nazism would die eventually, because it's just not a sustainable ideology.
Yeah,
But
and now it lingers, but it lingers on the edges. Sorry?
They would not have gotten world domination no matter what, I think, is the grand conclusion of things.
And just to say one last thing, the only reason that Nazism lingers, I think, is those that practice Nazism have this hope that it can one day be.
Well, certainly, yeah.
It goes in line with all people who believe the utopia is actually something that's achievable.
Yeah, fair enough.
That whole idea of the utopia, it's just not sustainable in and of itself.
Yeah, no matter what kind of
utopia. It's a contravention of human nature.
Yeah, that's it. That's the thing about them and the communists. Anyone on the fringes of political ideology that, again, I keep coming back to the word rabid, but that's the best way I can describe it. Just an ultimate pursuit of this utopia that will never be, no matter what your vision of utopia is. It's like, it's not gonna happen, man. It's not. You're willing to sacrifice everything for something that's not gonna happen.
Yeah, the common phrase "heaven on earth" is an oxymoron.
Yeah,
you can't have heaven on earth because heaven is earth defined.
Yeah. Oh, we got to get into a crazy biblical discussion at some point during this.
I've been thinking about an analogy about the Nazi regime. It's
okay. You've got a minute to explain it.
Oh, it's gonna take 4 seconds.
Okay.
Basically, think of radioactive material. It's explosive, but it's also decaying, and eventually it's gonna fizzle out.
Are you talking about your car? No. Okay.
Yikes.
And like radioactivity, it has a half-life. It will keep decaying, but it will never fully die out, because there's the hope that it can resurge.
Damn.
Amen.
Great.
Me and Phil just got deep with it there.
Yeah, that was not bad. Not bad. Okay, well, good talk. Again, we'll continue this series at some point with more what ifs, and keep trying to think of cool scenarios, alternate history scenarios. So hope you enjoyed that one.
If you guys have any suggestions or want to know what we think of a what if situation, slide into the DMs on Instagram. Let us know if there's any topics you guys want us to discuss in the new season. Let us know. With that being said,
hit the subscribe button on our YouTube. It's new.
Yeah. YouTube. Hit the bell as well. We'll let you know when we're making the next episode comes out. And remember to take care and brush your hair.